Hello, Superhar family and friends. Welcome to another Painting Legends video. So today I'll be painting an alien picture, but I'm gonna do something a little different for the stories. So there are a ton of alien encounter stories out there and they're amazing, but there are stories where aliens may be disguised and pretending to be humans, trying to fit in. And I really liked these stories and I like this idea. So these encounters might just be real people that are a little odd, but these people that describe these encounters really believe that they encountered an alien. So if you'd like me to tell more traditional alien stories, I can definitely do that. Leave a comment and I'll do another painting and do more traditional alien stories. So there's not a lot of background to this, but there is a doctor named Dr. David Jacobs, who is a historian and author known for his research on alien abductions and the concept of hybrid beings, aliens that he believes are living among humans. He's appeared on various radio shows, including Art Bell's, where he discussed his theories and findings regarding extraterrestrial contact and hybridization. I don't know if aliens are really walking among us, but the idea is so fascinating to me. I listened to the episodes where he was on Art Bell several times, and it's really it's a really weird, creepy idea. If he's correct, it's a terrifying idea to think about, especially if they have malicious intent, like taking over the planet. And that's what Dr. David Jacobs thinks, that this is like a slow plan to take over Earth. So anyway, here are some stories of encounters with possible aliens or hybrids trying to blend in. This first story, what is pizza? This happened in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1990. So one night, a man named Bill was working the late shift at his pizza parlor when two small adults approached the counter. They stood about 4 to 5 feet tall and had an unusual appearance that made them look slightly off. He describes them as if their features didn't quite align. Their faces were round with wide eyes. The male had a short, slender frame with a tuft of messy hair that stuck up at odd angles. He wore a simple oversized shirt and pants that looked a bit too large for him. The female was slightly shorter and had long, flowing hair that framed her face. She wore a bright, mismatched outfit. As they raised their right hands and introduced themselves by saying, "Hi, we're Americans," their body language suggested a mix of excitement and hesitation. Bill noticed that the male kept glancing around the shop as if he hadn't ever been in a pizza parlor before, while the female pointed to a bowl of green peppers with genuine curiosity, asking what they were. At this point, Bill's coworker had also noticed something strange about the pair. The two chefs exchanged looks of disbelief as Bill explained what a pepper was. "Do they taste nice?" the female asked. While waiting in silence for their pizzas, which included green peppers, to cook, other customers came and went as usual. When their order was ready, the unusual Americans paid their bill. Each took a single bite of their pizza and then threw the rest in the bin outside the shop. Bill began to suspect that his visitors might be from another planet. I had read stories about aliens pretending to be human beings, he said. These two individuals seemed to act like humans, but they weren't doing a very good job. I love that. So the next is the strange Albino family. Lisa, who lives on Montauk Point, Long Island, New York, encounters a strange family in the 1960s. Years ago, she was sitting with her mother on the deck having lunch when her mother suddenly asked, "Do you remember the Albino family that used to live in our area and always shopped at Gert's department store?" She hadn't thought about Gert's, a store long out of business, or the Albino family in years. Her mother began to describe how striking the family was, how well dressed and groomed they always appeared. She had often commented on how beautiful they were and paid attention to their outfits whenever she saw them. At the time, Lisa hadn't thought much of it, being a teenager, but as her mother continued talking, she realized how strange the family really was. The family was made up of 2 adults and 3 children, all of whom were The family was made up of 2 adults and 3 children, all of whom were albinos. The woman had seen a few other people with albinism, but hadn't noticed anything unusual about this family compared to others at the time. However, talking to her mother that day, she began to realize just how different this family seemed. All 5 members of the family stood about 6 feet tall, including the mother and daughter. The male members ranged from 6'3" to 6'5". They were extremely tall and towered over most of the other shoppers in the department store. Each of them had thick, pure white hair. They were beautiful, with high cheekbones and model-like features. Their skin was pure white, and they all shared the same eye color, large, clear, and very light blue. They kept to themselves, always staying together while they shopped, and appeared to be quiet, polite people. The idea of 2 albinos so similar in height, appearance, and facial features meeting and marrying seemed highly improbable. She remembered reading in college that albinos often had eye problems, with most having pinkish or reddish eye tints, not clear blue eyes like this family. While there are different degrees of albinism, she couldn't find any examples of entire families with such clear blue eyes. Her research came up empty when trying to determine if blue-eyed albinos could run in a family, but it seemed highly unlikely. She couldn't shake the feeling that this family was either an incredible genetic anomaly or something entirely different. Years after discussing the family with her mother, the woman came across articles online about an alien species known as the Tall Whites. As she scrolled through one of the websites, she saw an artist's drawing of these beings, and she was completely stunned. The depiction matched the family she remembered from Gert's. Tall, with beautiful faces, white hair, blue eyes, and high cheekbones. The woman realized she might never know whether this gentle, tall, beautiful family was simply a rare group of human albinos or something entirely different. Perhaps even beings from another world. She had often wondered about the family over the years and tried searching for any information on them, but nothing was found. Next story, hybrid at the doctor's office. A man from Perth, Australia experienced something strange in the summer of 2011 that reminded him of Rachel from Helen Luttrell's book, Rachel's Eyes, the strange but true case of a human-alien hybrid. At the time, he was dealing with some medical issues and waiting at a local clinic for a test, which takes about 2 hours and requires 3 blood samples. He arrived around 8:30 a.m. and was 4th in line, so he passed the time by reading a magazine. While waiting, he noticed a young woman approaching the clinic. She walked up to the front door, looked inside, then left. She repeated this 3 times over the next half hour. On her 4th attempt, she finally came inside, but instead of taking a ticket like everyone else, she simply sat down. The woman was about 6 feet tall, with extremely pale, almost white skin. She was very thin but didn't appear anorexic. She wore large sunglasses, the kind movie stars use to avoid being recognized. There was something different about her, though it was hard to pinpoint exactly what. Her arms, however, did seem unusually long, about a hand's length longer than normal. He began to feel like this woman might not be entirely human. On a whim, he thought, "You're not from here, are you?" Without making it obvious, he was observing her. At that exact moment, the woman whipped her head around and looked directly at him. Then she abruptly stood up and hurried out of the clinic, moving in an odd way, almost like a puppet with arms slightly outreached. Her awkward exit caught the attention of others outside, who also stared at her. As she turned to look at them, the sun reflected off her sunglasses and briefly illuminated her eyes. He said her eyes were enormous, with eyelids measuring around 45 millimeters wide, and the same in height. He couldn't make out the color of her irises, if she even had any, and noticed that the eyes themselves didn't reflect any light. When it was time for his second blood sample, he mentioned the strange woman to the clinic nurse, someone he had known for about 5 years. She replied, "I know who you're talking about. She needs specialized blood treatment. But don't tell anyone." The nurse knew the observer's father, who had worked for the same company. Next story, Alien in Walmart. In late December 2014, a woman and her husband were shopping at a Walmart in Washington, Missouri, when they had an unsettling encounter with a humanoid figure. The couple had gone to the store to buy groceries for a postponed Christmas dinner they were planning for the upcoming weekend after having been sick over the holidays. As they entered an aisle, they noticed a strange figure approaching. The witness was shocked by the sight. She said the being was pushing a cart with tiny white hands that had unnaturally long fingers. Its skin was stark white, and its facial features were barely discernible. A small bump for a nose, and a mouth that looked more like a thin line or crease. Its large almond-shaped eyes stretched around the sides of its head, and they were shiny and black, reminiscent of insect eyes. The being's hair was cut bluntly below the jawline and appeared to be an artificial shiny black wig. Its neck was incredibly thin, resembling the thickness of cardboard, and its clothing hung off its frame as though it was draped on a hanger. The witness couldn't determine if the being was male or female. She glanced at her husband, who appeared stunned, and then noticed another woman nearby who looked equally as shocked, as though she might faint. The strange figure passed by them and turned into the next aisle without acknowledging anyone, determined to confirm what she had seen. The witness followed, but in the brief moment the figure was out of sight. It had completely vanished. Despite checking the surrounding aisles, the being was nowhere to be found. The couple didn't discuss the strange encounter until they were in the car, at which point the witness asked her husband what he thought it was. He simply responded that he believed that they encountered something out of the ordinary. This next story is from a former postal worker in Washington, D.C. He once experienced something strange while delivering mail to a building in the city. One day, after casually tossing an apple core on the ground outside the building, the head of security angrily confronted him about littering. Surprised, he asked how the guard knew, and was told that the whole building and surrounding area were under constant video surveillance. He realized that the building had unusually tight security, especially since he could only access the mailroom and had to ring a buzzer to be let inside each time he delivered mail. A few weeks later, while approaching the building to deliver mail as usual, he noticed 3 strange figures crossing the street towards the building. At first, they seemed normal, but on closer inspection, he realized they were far from it. The figures were extremely thin and moved in an odd way, waddling side to side as if they couldn't bend their legs. What shocked him most was how flat their bodies and faces appeared, almost like they had no thickness, similar to clothes hanging on a hanger. All 3 wore black suits and sunglasses. He watched as the strange figures rang the building's buzzer and were led inside. Terrified, but trying to keep calm, he decided to go ahead with his delivery. When he entered the mailroom, about 10 normal men were standing there, staring at him. They asked him if he had seen anything unusual. Before he could respond, one of the strange flat figures walked up behind him. Too scared to even look at it, he could feel its presence and was overwhelmed with fear. The men asked again if he had seen anything, and trembling, he lied and said he hadn't. After what felt like an eternity, they let him leave. The figure stepped back, and he had to summon all his courage to walk past it and out of the building. It was the most terrifying experience of his life. At the time, he thought it might be some kind of government experiment with robots, but he couldn't understand why it would be happening in public. The fear was so intense that he even considered leaving the country, but worried that acting strangely might draw more attention and put him in danger. A week later, his supervisor suddenly reassigned him to a new route, something that was unexpected. Although his boss asked if there had been any problems, he kept quiet about what had happened. Eventually, he quit his job and now works at an airport. The next story, I Met an Alien. A woman in the late 1990s was working as a supervisor in an international trucking company in Tampa, Florida, when she had a peculiar encounter. One day, a man was introduced to her as the new vice president of the Southeast Division. She said his name, as she can remember, as Joe. He was exceptionally tall, around 6'6" or even taller. Her head only reached his shoulder, and she was 5'10". She describes him as being extremely slender and strikingly pale, with white hair. He wore a white shirt, a brown necktie, and a dark gray suit. When he entered the office, no one else was around, and he seemed to look around the room quietly. She introduced herself and extended her hand for a handshake. As soon as she touched his hand, it was ice cold, and his fingers were unusually long. As he grasped her hand, she felt an odd vibrating electrical shock travel from her hand up her elbow. She said they released hands, and when she looked up at him, she noticed his eyes and a slight smirk on his face. In that moment, she had the distinct feeling that he knew she had realized he wasn't human. She slowly walked away as he turned and left without saying a word, heading back to the dock where the freight was. The entire encounter was eerie, and he remained silent the whole time. The next story, Alien in Auto Shop. In August 2015, a man was waiting in line at an auto shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when he had a strange encounter with an unusual woman. The incident took place in the afternoon, when a small elderly woman entered the shop. Her appearance immediately caught his attention. She looked to be in her 70s or 80s, with messy gray hair that fell around her chin. She stood about 4.5 feet tall and wore loose, wrinkled shorts and a blouse, giving her a disheveled appearance. Her skin was pale and pinkish, and her limbs were unusually thin. At first, the man suspected that she might have a condition, like progeria, due to her frail stature. But her face seemed normal, so he dismissed the thought. Afterward, he moved to a nearby waiting area, but 15 minutes later, he noticed the woman struggling to open the glass door to the room. Another customer opened it for her, and she sat down nearby. Something about her intrigued the man, and he kept observing her. Then, as their eyes met, he noticed something disturbing. Her eyes were completely black, with no visible whites. Startled, the man felt unnerved, and the woman seemed to sense his discomfort. Without a word, she quietly stood up and left the room. Less than 20 seconds later, the man followed, but the woman had completely vanished. Weird man at a bar and grill. In 1995, a man named Jason, working as a waiter at a bar and grill in Scarborough, Ontario, had a strange encounter with two customers. It was mid-afternoon, and as the lunch rush began to slow, two men entered the restaurant. He greeted the two men, but immediately something struck him as odd about one of them. The man's skin appeared almost translucent, as if he were wearing a skin suit. He was tall, around 6'4", and mostly bald, though the other man seemed unremarkable. The one with the unusual appearance acted strangely, particularly when ordering his food. When this peculiar man ordered a hamburger, he seemed unfamiliar with the process and was especially concerned about the mayonnaise, asking multiple times to ensure that there would be none on his burger. Throughout their time at the restaurant, he watched the pair closely, convinced that the man in question was wearing a disguise. The odd behavior stayed with Jason, but he didn't think much about it until 1997, when the movie Men in Black was released. In the film, there's a farmer whose skin is used as a disguise by an alien, and this reminded him of the strange encounter he had at the restaurant. The man's bizarre mannerisms and unnatural appearance left a lasting impression, and Jason still believes he may have encountered a non-human entity that day. Even as a paramedic in Toronto, with 16 years of experience seeing all manner of illness and death, Jason recalls that no other human had ever left him feeling the way that figure did. The encounter continues to haunt him. Creepy stories. These are some of my favorites. This is how the painting turned out. Please let me know in the comments what you think, or if you or anybody has experienced anything like this. We would love to know. We'd love to hear those stories. It's so creepy. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.